I live in a town called Robinson, and I can't prove it, but I'm going to go ahead and say that we have the highest concentration of migratory birds of any landlocked, suburban, non-preservation area in the northeastern United States. I'm talking cardinals, sparrows, mourning doves, blue jays, starlings, ruffed grouse, blackbirds, hawks, eagles, owls, and so on, but mostly robins. Many people like birds, and some think they have spiritual meaning. I just don't want them pooping on all my stuff. I've had these gates up here for a couple of years, and for whatever reason, the birds just discovered them this year, and they've been perching and pooping all over them. So I put these spinners up, and so far they've been pretty effective at keeping the birds away. They've been up for about 2.5, 3 weeks, and they've cut down significantly on the amount of bird droppings here. There's several things that birds don't like. One of them is movement, especially unpredictable movement, and bright lights or reflections, and these combine both of those elements. There's just one problem. My wife thinks they make our yard look like a circus. The spinners are basically really shiny pinwheels, and they do come in other styles. They have an aluminum spindle with a bearing on top and bottom that holds the pinwheel in place and allows it to spin. They're rust resistant and surprisingly durable. We've had several severe thunderstorms and they survived completely unscathed. Although I would probably take them down in winter, you just unscrew the cap at the top and remove the spindle and try not to drop it. Installation was fairly easy. They seem to keep the birds away within a radius of about 10 to 15 feet, although they're not as effective when there's no wind or it's dark. I would say they've cut down on the bird droppings for me by at least half, so overall I give them a B-. And they also add a bit of, shall we say, flair, and that may or may not fit your aesthetic. There are a couple other similar devices, and if I had to guess, I'd say they probably have similar results. So now the birds have moved up to our back porch behind me. I don't know if this is just to spite us or what, but they've been trying to build a nest there for the past couple days and we keep trying to chase them off. They had been trying to build one back here on this light fixture, and my wife stuck that's a grill cleaning brush, and that has kept them away. So those are pretty effective. Another thing that's supposed to keep birds away is an owl or a fake owl that you can buy. So I'm going to try a football because it kind of looks like an owl, and this may be a coincidence, but I had this football sitting on a couch over here, and then I just put it away, and then the birds came. There it is. It's up there right now. Oh, there were two. To the surprise of no one, the football did not work. You can see the birds are up there right now. I made this, a fake owl, using the football in an Amazon box and the Amazon packaging. And I've notched the bottom, so this is gonna sit right up on the ledge here. There's a bird in there right now. Not fooled at all. Get out of here. Katie asked me what the owl's name is. Ideas that I've been brainstorming. Weird Al Yankovic, Alec Baldwin, and Al Roker.
Weird Owl Yankovic.
Yeah.
That's the way.
Weird Al has not done his job. Perhaps more accordion. You can see I've mounted this thing as close to the nest as I can get it, because I think if I had put it down here on the porch anywhere, it would not have scared the birds away there. But the one question I have at this point is, who's got the circus house now? They're back. It did not last. I've tried to up the intensity a little bit. I made this. This is a 1" by 4" piece of pressure treated lumber, and that should make sure I get full coverage up on that beam. 2" galvanized nails. Pretty common stuff, pretty easy to make. It's just a little bit more drastic, but these are drastic times. What happens next might bother some people because birds are federally protected, and so by removing this nest, I'm technically in violation of that. However, there are exceptions for when birds' nests are in hazardous locations, and in this case, it's a health hazard to my wife and I because nests harbor bacteria, pathogens, parasites, and all kinds of nasty stuff. So I'm willing to accept whatever backlash it might cause. I did try to remove this before the birds had laid any eggs, so hopefully they have time to build another nest somewhere else. The bird returned to the scene of my crime, decided it wasn't going to work, and took off. We found these on Amazon. You can see they're much lower profile and they're even a similar color. They're made by this company called Haas or House. They come in 16.25 inch length. You can see they're broken up into 4 pieces. Ouch. So you can break these apart. I don't know, wear leather gloves or something like that, because they're not pleasant to touch. These holes there where you can screw them into whatever surface. Mounting these to some kind of a metal surface would be more complicated. If you didn't want to use some kind of sheet metal screw in those holes there, you would have to use some kind of adhesive. But for these wooden fences, they should be pretty easy. So that's how sharp they are. I'm actually bleeding. My wife was like, yeah, those spinners gotta go. So I drove these things in with some galvanized nails, and I used a nail set to get them down in between the spikes. It was kind of tedious. I didn't really love it, but it wasn't terrible either. You just have to get complete coverage, otherwise the birds will find a way to land there, and that can be kind of tricky depending on the size of the surface. You might have to do a lot of custom cutting and fitting. Of course, you don't have to use nails. You can use an exterior grade screw like I did on top of the gates here. I wouldn't recommend pounding on the top of your gates for any reason. It might cause them to sag. And then on top of the posts, I added 4 galvanized finish nails just because the surface area was kind of a unique size. And then 4 or 5 days later, I saw this guy walking right across the top of it, kind of like he had something to prove. So they're not perfect. I assume the big spikes would be better, but these are definitely an improvement over what I had there previously. Spikes are the most foolproof method, which is why they're so common on commercial buildings, but they're still more tedious to install because you have to cover every square inch of the landing surface. Otherwise, a bird will literally perch right next to the spikes. They come in a couple varieties, and generally the bigger the better, but the purpose is not so much to be lethal as it is just to make it physically impossible for a bird to land. The smaller spikes don't do this as well, as you can see here. In my case, they still cut down significantly on the amount of droppings, and I think they were most effective with the really small birds. The robins figured out how to navigate them because I think their feet were just the right size, but I still saw a lot fewer birds in general. The plastic will also warp in the sun, but I think this might actually make them more effective. Overall, I give them a B+ because they're more reliable than the spinners, and they still look weird, but in a different way. To be thorough, then I went ahead and bought a couple of official fake owls to see if they performed any better than my homemade ones. They had these fins that you attach to the back of their heads, and they help them move around with the wind. And it's supposed to simulate an owl's movement, because we all know their heads just kind of spin like this. That's natural. There's a couple ways you can mount these things. For the first one, I decided to drill some holes in the base and then attach some exterior grade screws so I could just mount it right to the top of these fences here. Besides that gate in the backyard, I also have a retaining wall in the front of my yard, and that tends to get a lot of bird activity as well. So I thought maybe putting this owl in between the two would help intimidate the birds on both sides. And of course, these owls are made of plastic, so they're super lightweight, and they have these plugs on the bottom, so if you remove that, you can fill them with rocks, and then you can go ahead and just sit them right in your garden, or I guess right in your backyard. I went a slightly different direction with this one. I mounted this L bracket onto it, and then I attached it to a post, and by post, I mean the handle of a rake that had broken off. So I could have put these on this gate post that's on the other side of my yard, because those get a lot of birds. But I decided, well, if you want to put these out in the center of an open space and you don't have something to mount them to, how can we try to simulate that? So I went ahead and put that rake handle in the dirt, and then I put the owl right on top there, and I just kind of bolted it to the wood. And then I kind of stepped away and just let Owlus keep guard for a while. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned, this is Owlus Cooper, and this guy is Elton John. I kind of went with a musical theme. A lot of my neighbors have these, and I talked to a guy who has 2 owls on his back porch, and he said the birds are not afraid of them at all. It's worth noting that he's had them up for a couple years, so the birds have gotten pretty used to them. The owls are still in good shape, they're just not doing their job. I've had mine up for almost 2 weeks now, and I have noticed a difference with both Owlus and Alton, significantly reducing the bird paraphernalia. So for ease of install, effective range, and general vibes, I've had to rate these as my favorite deterrent so far. But it has been only a couple weeks. There's other methods as well, like ultrasonic devices, but they also affect dogs and cats. There's lasers, but those are primarily used on farms because they're pretty expensive. Plus, you could put someone's eye out with those things. The bottom line is birds are adaptable. They will figure out how to survive in virtually any environment where they find themselves, and especially in one like this where there are fewer natural predators but also fewer places to perch because it's the suburbs, they'll find that balance. And just because it's my name on the mailbox doesn't mean they're not entitled to be here. So there really is no universal deterrent. The best thing to do is maybe just invest in a pressure washer. I hope that's not discouraging. I just try to be as informative as I can in these videos. I also try to get to the important stuff as quickly as possible in the beginning, rather than talking incessantly like I'm doing now. Finally, on a completely different topic, I have a Substack called The Patience Project, and it's totally different than anything I do here. It's about how we can all be a little more patient, and I actually do a lot of research for it, if you can believe that. So hopefully I see you over there. Either way, thanks for birding with me today, and I'll see you on the next project.